Hi, everybody. So I am really excited about this week. I know that we are not even to Thanksgiving yet, but I'm already getting right into winter and Christmas STEM challenges and giving them each a pandemic makeover for social distancing and distance learning because I am just like you, probably, we've given up a lot this year, and STEM challenges don't have to be one of them, but we do obviously have to make some adjustments. And some of these challenges, it's actually much easier to do than you might think. So I'm actually going to dive right in. Let me actually take this off, and I'm going to take this little banner off so you don't get blocked from any of the images that we're going to be looking at. So these are the winter and Christmas challenges that I'm going to go over this week. Today we're starting with Snowman Stretch, which is the one right in the middle. And then I'm going to do the three winter ones first. So tomorrow we'll do Sled and Slope or Sleigh and Slope, depending on which one you're doing. Then Frozen Fortress. Then we'll do Reindeer Relay, and then Candy Cane Calamity. And then every day when we do this, we're just going to go through the changes that you would need to make in order to make this like accessible for your students if they're doing this from home, and easy and manageable for you in terms of like materials distribution and all that if your kids are actually still coming to class in person, because we will have them building by themselves most likely. I assume that's a restriction that's going on in most places, so that's the assumption I'm going in with. If they are in a place where they can work with partners, that's great, but it is absolutely not in my frame of reference right now. So let's just get right into it. With Snowman Stretch, the reason that I wanted to do this one today with you guys is because it is absolutely, I'm going to come back for this. It is absolutely the simplest one for you to do in terms of material. But what's beautiful about it is it really, really adjustable to make it way more difficult if you want to for your older students, or to keep it pretty fairly simple if you have younger students. There's so many different ways to go with it, and you don't hardly need any materials at all. So that's why I figured we'll start with this one, because if you're only going to do one STEM challenge, like coming up for this winter, this is the one I would say to do, because you'll see. You'll see. Let's get back to it. So, if you want to keep it simple with your younger students, you can have them build the snowman. Their main goal is just basically to make the tallest snowman possible. I'm going to give you some criteria and constraints in a minute. But if you have older students, let's try to beef it up a little bit, right? Let's connect it to some of those math standards they might be working on. So in that case, if you have like fifth grade and up, I would change that to be the snowman of the greatest volume or surface area, depending on what's more in line with the standards that you're working on. There are other adjustments that you can make if you have older students and you still want to do a height requirement, but you want to make it harder. So let's get into that. Let's see. Before we do that, let's talk about the materials. So this is what I would typically suggest, but we don't need everything that you see in this picture, not by a long shot. So here are some different options or some different ideas of things you could use. Now, in a normal year, what I might just say is I actually might just go in and say 3 sheets of paper or 5 sheets of copy paper, and that's what each student would get, and that's it. And maybe some tape, of course. Tape is not necessary. It does make things easier. So even if you have students at home, if they don't have tape, you don't need to worry about whether or not they have tape. We're going to talk about all these different modifications for materials, but that is one of the simplest ones. It's just 3 sheets of paper. Now, if your kids are at home, you don't know that they have necessarily scrap paper. Now, maybe there's something, if you're sending home work packets, maybe they can use old copies of things that they are done with and they don't need, or they can use junk mail. I have some lots of ideas. Let me bring this back into focus so we can kind of go through some of them. I also have tried one poster board in the past, but that's not an easy thing to do in this situation. But I think something you might be able to get them to do is find a box, any box. So whether that's a cereal box or a tissue box. So maybe if they have an empty tissue box or a cereal box or a macaroni and cheese box or a shoe box, any box that they are allowed to use. And one of these little notes that I have here for me that I meant to tell you is remind your students to always get their materials approved by their parents. So whatever it is they want to use, they need permission first, because you don't want them to use a box that the parent had planned to use for something else. You don't want your parents upset with you, right? And I'll tell you some more ways to adjust this one in a second, but you can just do that. You can also do one paper bag, whether that's sort of like a lunch bag or like a Trader Joe's shopping bag, or junk mail, or business cards, or toilet paper tubes. Those are all options, and you don't need all of them. You want to just choose pretty much one primary material, whatever's easiest to get. So these are some suggestions you can make for your students and see what they have at home. I would always recommend doing this a day ahead of when you actually want them to be building. So make the first sort of assignment figuring out what their materials are that they can use, because they're going to have to like go and see what's in their house. They're going to have to get permission. So you don't want to try to do that all in the same day if you can avoid it. Things that are optional but helpful to have are straws or sticks if you want them to have either arms or just to give that snowman additional structure. Pipe cleaners, tape, scissors, and ruler or measuring tape. So those are great to have, but they are not 100% necessary. I wanted to show you something with the toilet paper tubes as well. What I don't want to have happen if we use toilet paper tubes is I don't want students to stack, 3 on top of each other and say, hey, I'm done. There's my snowman. Because just simply stacking materials is weak for a STEM challenge, in my opinion. Maybe if you have kindergartners, maybe that would be appropriate, but I think we can do better. I always want to do something where the students actually have to manipulate to build, to make it actually, like engineering. So one thing that you might think about doing is having them, when we get into the criteria and constraints, having it set up in a way where the tiers can't all be the same size, so you won't end up with like straight stacking. Now if your kids have like 20 of these lying around, they could still end up sort of doing like almost like a tiered Christmas cake, which might be all right with you. But you can add something to the criteria and constraints list where they're required to alter the material before they use it. Or let me get into some. I'll go back. Let me go back to this, and then I'll come back and show you something else. Okay. So let's talk about our simple criteria and constraints list for younger students, and then how we can beef it up. Okay. I am going to be showing you some pictures throughout, and I want to remind you that these are for you to see, but I never recommend showing students pictures ahead of time because it gets in their head. It ruins their opportunity to problem solve on their own, because if you already show them a solution, a lot of students will just rebuild what you show them. I know I say that all the time, but I never know if I have the same people watching as I do on other occasions. So sometimes some things bear repeating. So I apologize if you've heard me say that a million times. But if you are just with students that you want to keep this really super simple, you can say the snowman can be no more than 3 tiers, or you can change whatever X is. So we know like our typical snowman looks like 3 tiers, right? And it has to be freestanding. It can't lean on anything. Now you can decide if they're going to give a lot of students, you don't have to tell them to make a hat. A lot of students will want to make a hat. And what you might run into, so I'm just like forewarning you, because if you're going to say it can only have 3 tiers, but then allow them to measure to the top of the hat, you will have students who didn't think to make a hat. And then, it can cause all kinds of havoc. So you might just want to say 3 tiers. You can have an optional hat. When we measure for height, we will measure to the highest point in your snowman. If it's got a hat, that's included. So that's why you see these ones have these little pipe cleaner hats, but it's not required. And so that was my little note to myself, so I wouldn't forget about the hat. And there are a couple of these images here that came from Mrs. B's science show. She shared them on Instagram a year or 2 ago. Let me know, I could share them as well. So this is one where they used, I think it was a single poster board for this one. But what you can do to make the criteria and constraints list a little bit tougher for your older students or more experienced students, you can require that they use at least 2 different geometric solids. So you can see here, we've got cylinders, we've got a couple of cones. You could require that each tier is a different geometric solid shape. You could say each tier needs to be X% of the previous tier. So let me come back on for this. So like if this is the bottom of the snowman, and I could cut a bunch of these apart, right? And make something even wider for my initial tier. But if I'm doing height, if that's what we're doing, so by height, if I measure this, and I can say the second tier can be up to 50% of the first tier, and so on. Or you can set that percentage however you want it to be. And you can also set it based on volume or surface area or height. You don't have to just do, X percentage of the height. And that can definitely ramp things up a little bit. You can require them to build an inverted snowman so that the narrowest tier is the one on the base level tier, and they get wider as you go up. That can be really fun to watch them try to do that. You can also have them alternate primary materials used. So in tier one, if they use toilet paper tubes, then in tier two, they can't use toilet paper tubes. So they might use junk mail or something else they might have. And you can also alternate the shapes in that way as well. So each alternating tier needs to be a different shape and or a different primary material. You can also require that they build multiple snowmen. You can see in this one, you can probably guess what they might have been working on in class because all of these are little cube and rectangular prism snowmen. So it's a nice way to tie in whatever it is you're working on. But some modifications to do if you're working on social distancing or distance learning, this is the best one for students to do on their own. They really don't need a partner. But I always like to, whenever possible, have some form of collaboration. Since they can't probably share materials and build together, they can still work within a group, not close to each other, but perhaps trading off videos, perhaps on Flipgrid or Google Slides, where they're giving each other feedback on their plans. And also, once they've built, they should be giving each other feedback as well. So, I've mentioned before that they could design as a team potentially, but if your students are distance learning, they might be using different materials and it might not really be possible. So they could come up with perhaps a unifying design element that they're all required to have so that their team has sort of a theme going on with their snowmen. Or you can have them use an app like Flipgrid where perhaps the student is starting to do their build and maybe they run into a problem. So they ask their group in their video recording, hey, I'm building my snowman. This is where I'm at. This is what's happening. I really want there to be a pipe. I don't have any pipe cleaners or I don't have any tape and I can't get this thing to connect the way that I want it to. And basically they're asking their group members for help. Like, I don't have any tape. Can you think of another thing I could use? Or can you help me figure out how I might, I do have scissors, so maybe I can cut and connect or something like that. I think I mentioned, but I'm not sure if I mentioned today. One thing that you can have your students ask their parents for if they don't have tape is to ask if they have any address labels, because I get sent those in the mail all the time. I have so many, I can't use them all. So their parents might be able to let them use that. But they have to ask permission and they have to know that they're there somewhere, right? But then if you do that sort of idea with the Flipgrid of having them, have people they're responsible for in their teams, then it can be part of what they do. They have to watch their teammates' videos and respond to the videos with either a suggestion or answering their question or asking a question of their group member as well about their design. So that's one way to keep the collaboration going. Some extensions for this are states of matter. Obviously, anything is going to work with states of matter on this one. So speeding up or slowing down an ice cube melt. Oh my goodness, I just realized I wasn't showing you the slides, everybody. These are just a few more examples. I think maybe these two, maybe. These are the pictures I meant to show you, and I think I don't remember when I stopped showing you pictures. I apologize for that. So those are just a few different examples of what you could end up with. I just want you to see that there are so many different materials that can be used on this. Extensions on this. So states of matter. I really love the idea of having students design an experiment around trying to speed up or slow down the melting of an ice cube. And there's actually within my resource, I actually have like a step-by-step to go through that. This would be a really nice one for them to be able to do at home because it takes a long time for ice cubes to melt. So gathering that data is just a lot simpler to do at home than it would be in class. Going into anything about the science of snowflakes or symmetry, 3D solids obviously are all over this challenge. I like the idea of tying in ELA to have them do a modern retelling of Frosty the Snowman, and they can either use the lyrics of the song to do that, or if they have access to the cartoon. And then from there, when they rewrite it, if they do a song, they could perform and record it. Or and then if it's a handwritten story, they could use stop motion animation to illustrate it and create a project around that. Or even just like get them off the screens and give them the choice is probably what I would recommend, because that way every time kids have more choice, they have more buy-in. And some kids will really be into stop motion animation, and some kids will really be into just like actually paper and pencil and drawing, and creating that book. I did want to mention that this resource has like printables that go with it, and it also has paperless versions of that. And on Wednesday, I'm doing this thing this whole week, this little promotion that's like grateful for teachers. Actually, have it on this bit.ly link here, grateful for teachers, all lowercase. It's going to be half off. The paperless and print bundle is usually like $6. So it's going to be like $3 and you'll get both print and paperless. And actually, if you go to that bit.ly link now, you can, or not now, right this second, don't go away, I'm not done. But you can see other teachers who are participating and what's special each day, because there's like freebies today and like there's something every day of the week. Oh, and a giveaway, all that stuff. So this is what the Google Slides look like. I'm going to come back because I see a question. And then if you post pictures, by the way, if you do this challenge and you post pictures at all, I love, 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 love seeing them. So please tag me. I'm Feel Good Teaching on Facebook and Instagram, and Feel Good Teach on Twitter. And then, or you can just email me if that's easier. All right, let me come back on screen. Sorry, I have a tendency to do that. When I come on screen and then I go back to the slideshow, I forget to actually do that part. So I have a question here from Karen. What about vocabulary? I'm thinking about SPED kids who have language goals. So Karen, I'm going to ask for a little bit of clarification on that. Are you concerned about the vocabulary around the geometric solids, or around the criteria and constraints or materials? Or are you asking for extensions that go around vocabulary? One thing you can do that if that's what you're, I don't know when the question came in, so I don't know which thing. So you can tell me that if you're still on and watching. And then I will say, if it's vocabulary, when you mention they have language goals, then I'm assuming that it's about extensions, in which case it's hard for me to know without knowing what the specific goal is, but things like around like synonyms. So you could maybe have them, or even just like they have their adjectives, let's say that. So let's say they have their snowman that they built, and maybe they need to describe their snowman. So if they have language goals, they might be around oral communication. So tell us about your snowman, describe your snowman. And you might need to prompt them with questions in order to do that. And there are also questions, that are kind of typical, like what materials did you use to build your snowman? And then perhaps, depending if you're in person or you're doing hybrid or you're doing distance learning, perhaps they could record their answers and upload them, or have their parents upload them. Descriptions, synonyms for things that are tall, or synonyms for things that are big, or synonyms for things that are cold. Looks like I've got, Karen is, okay, all of the above except extensions. Okay. So around the criteria and constraints, if I tend to use that vocabulary always, even with my special ed students when I was in the classroom, and it doesn't take too long to get them a little bit acclimated to that. But one of the things I also did is when I do a criteria and constraints list, I'll put criteria, and then underneath it, I'll put requirements, which isn't always like going to help, right? Depending on where your kid is. But I'll put it in green. So like green means go. These are things you have to have. And then in red, I put constraints or limitations to help with the color coding. Like these are things we have to have. These are things we can't do or we can't use. And then what was another thing? Back in the day, I had a friend who would say, or I had an instructor who would use wants and don't wants, but I always hated that. I thought it was too simple, but but depending on, where your kid is at, that might be like, this is what we want our snowman to have, and this is what we don't want our snowman to have. I would still use the color coding there, but that might simplify things, give a little bit of help or assistance. With academic language, I do like when we're having, I think a lot of it can be handled by the way that you ask the questions. And depending on how you're delivering your instruction, this is always so tricky, right? This is where we're at right now, right? Because the way that one district is managing things in one state right now with their teachers and versus another, it can be so disparate that it's hard to give advice that sort of like covers everybody. But my tendency for the math pieces of this, um, I don't, without knowing the kid and without knowing the specific problems. I mean, I tend to use the academic language and then assist and supplement where it's needed. Um, you can also adjust the criteria and constraints differently if you need to. But if we're using just a tight snowman, we're building for a height and we're using a different material for each tier. So maybe tier is a problem word, right? So we can say maybe level might work, or maybe we show like a 2D picture of like the three, basic circles that are a snowman. And we go like, this is level one. The one that touches the ground is level one. And the next one is level two. And the next one is level three. And you are going to build a 3-level snowman, and you need to use at least 2 different shapes. So you might need to build a lot of scaffolding in before you even allow them to build. Um, and that's true across the board, right? I mean, if you have very young students, they would need to do this as well. But you can kind of go over what are some different shapes. Maybe the day before you have students go around and collect things in their home. Again, they need parent permission because you never want them to show something their parents don't want to be shown. But you could have them go around and like collect things that are different 3D shapes. And so before you even talk about doing the STEM challenge, we can say, oh, this is a shape that I found in my home. And what is this? Oh, this is a cylinder. And so then maybe what you can have done is from, even if you don't have your kids do that, right? You could do that as a lesson. Here's another shape I found in my home. What do we see about this shape? And kind of go through and define the attributes. And then maybe what you do is you have a slide that you take a picture of and that you have accessible for your students, that they can see, oh, here are some different examples. If you're going to have a requirement where each thing has to be a different shape, or you have to have 2 different shapes present, or geometric solids, that they have a slide they can refer to say, oh, here's an example of something. Here's an example of something. And that's kind of how I would build that up. So if I didn't answer your question, Karen, you can't see me, but I'm nodding my head in agreement. Okay, good. If there's something I missed, or like there's still like a little bit, just let me know in the questions. And I see another one here, but from another viewer. So I'm going to pull that one in. But if I missed anything, if there's something else you still need me to clarify, or just kind of brainstorm with you on, let me know. Okay. All right. So Marie wrote, are the pictures from slides we missed in the TPT product? No, the photographs were things that were shared on social media through other teachers. I think I said Mrs. B's science show is one of them. I'm going to look back here for the other one. Here's one. We should bring this back in so you can see it. And I will take this question off. So the cubes were from Steam Powered Classroom. I want to say she shared them. It's probably been a year. I'm not sure if it was longer than that. And the same thing is true of Mrs. B's science show. So this is one of the reasons. This is one, I don't know. This is one I made at some point. I'm not sure. But one of the reasons I don't share a ton of pictures in the resources, but I do tend to share a lot on social media, is that I really don't want teachers to show students these pictures. And I know they do that a lot. And I know that's ultimately their choice to do it. But I think a lot of the time we do things without thinking about the impact sometimes, because we're just like, oh, it's helpful, right? It's helpful to see a picture or just like see an example before you start. But with STEM challenges, it's a little bit different from some of the other things we do, in that we don't actually want to precede them with too many ideas of how to solve the problem. We want to get them used to looking at criteria and constraints list and developing a solution to the problem, and keeping it as open-ended as we possibly can. Because once you show them anything, even once you show them one single picture, it's not as open-ended as it used to be, because now they've got the preconceived notion. I don't have so much of an issue with doing it after the first build, though, because they're going to see each other's designs at that point, and I consider it kind of part of the research that goes into improving the second iteration of a design. And I know not everybody does second iterations of the design, but that's part of the engineering design process and the NGSS. So we should be doing it, maybe not every single time because of practical time reasons, but whenever we can. So if you're looking for ever looking for additional examples, because it just helps you and your teacher mind to kind of see what's possible, or what other people have done, My recommendation would be to follow me on either Facebook or Instagram, because whenever I see images like that, I will usually ask if I just see them posted randomly, or if somebody tags me, I'll often ask, "Oh, is that a picture I can share?" As long as I, put like a little smiley face sticker over the student's face. Um, you'll see those things on social media kind of going through, and you're always welcome to reach out to me with a question, through email or through any of those social media. Like if you're running into like a tricky situation, or just anything, let me know, because you can see right now I will talk about STEM all day if anybody's interested. So if there's ever something you come across and you just feel like you need a little bit more, the other good place to look is my YouTube channel, which is Feel Good Teaching, because there I'll do full video walkthroughs. Like each of my 52 challenges has like a pre-recorded video walkthrough for what I consider like normal times, like the before times. So the reason I'm doing these pandemic makeovers this year is we need to make adjustments, right? But in previous years, I sort of like already went through everything the way I would do it in the normal time, and you can see examples there as well. So yeah, those some of the pictures are in the TBT resource, like on the cover image, but not all of them. And that will always be the case. So I because things are coming up and popping up all the time. And if you do them again, I would love it if you would tag me, because I love to see. It's always stunning to me, like what kids do. This is one of my favorite challenges because it can't be cheaper materials wise, and there's just a lot of versatility with things you can do to make it harder. So I am looking. Let me see. Karen wrote, "Do you have visuals that go with the vocab?" I don't. I don't have visuals. I would make them if I were in a situation where I felt like I needed them, just in the way that I explained that. Like where I might put. Generally, I do my resources for second through eighth grade because that's what I taught. And so, if I were in a year where I felt like we needed to have some extra supplement, that would be the kind of thing that I would either like draw on the board, the whiteboard, or like a sketch pad or whatever we're doing this year, in these different situations, and kind of talk through those things. The other thing is in a normal year, which, and I made these original resources for normal years, is that they would be usually in a team, right? They'd be part of a team. So, like, if they didn't understand what tier was, then maybe their classmates would or their group members would. So, I don't have extra visuals for that, but I do think it would be fairly simple to sort of like pull in a clip art picture. There are actually little clip art pictures within the resource of like, the 2D classic snowman shape. So it is the kind of thing you could talk through as you're going through the criteria and constraints list. And also my criteria and constraints lists are editable if you were going to use my resources for that. So you could change things if you didn't like I said earlier, if you wanted wants, don't wants, as opposed to criteria and constraints, you could make those adjustments. And then the math stuff is just, it kind of depends on what you're going to be using and going through. But I do think I would probably do a pre-lesson where we just look around, find shapes from the home. If that's where you're at, right? If you got fifth graders and maybe you don't have students, maybe your students are kind of on grade level or mostly or close, you might not need to do that sort of like seeding lesson ahead of time. But if you do, that's what I would do. Find some shapes around your house. Find some clean trash would be actually ideal, because then they would be gathering materials at the same time that they're finding the shapes, if that helps. All right. Okay. This is a good session, guys. You asked some really good questions. Thank you so much. Tomorrow I'll be back at the same time, and we're going to be talking about sled and slope, which is like the winter version, or sleigh and slope. If you want to do a Christmas version, then we do sleigh. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. If you have any questions, let me know. You can always drop them in the comments. Otherwise, hope I see you guys tomorrow with your great questions. All right. Bye for now. Have a great evening.